Hello folks, and welcome back to Retro Gamer Diaries, where we'll continue our story of the golden years of video games in the 1980s. In episode 1, I covered the early 80s where video games were booming in the arcades. I remember playing all of the classic arcade games. My favourite arcade experience was entering that Atari Star Wars cabinet and blowing up that Death Star. For that moment, I was absolutely Luke Skywalker. And this is what arcades done. They took you to a magical place. I loved everything about the arcades. It was totally an amazing experience and nothing could compare to it. And it was at this moment when the video gaming revolution had taken over the entire world. My episode 2 then covered the introduction of video games into our homes for the first time, and in particular the success of the Fairchild's Channel F, Atari 2600 and Intellivision.
You mean you have an Atari video game system but not Atari Missile Command?
Well, then you must have Defender. Great game. Or Challenge like Star Raiders. What about Yar's Revenge? Well, you gotta have Berserk, right? And Atari Space Invaders, a classic.
You don't? Come on. An Atari system without those games? That's like having a stereo with no hit records.
Star Wars. It's great in the arcade. Whoa! TIE fighters! Fireballs! Coming right at me! Watch the laser towers. Aim for the tops. Pick in the cannons. Use the force. They're coming too fast! Wait! Wait! My shields are gone! All right! I'm going in!
Some game, huh?
Some game! In a galaxy of video games, there is only one.
Out here we entertain ourselves at home, so we got Atari video games. There's so many different games to play. We especially like Space Invaders, zapping those little devils from outer space. It's fun, but personally I think the whole idea of creatures from outer space is a little far-fetched.
No other company offers you as many different video game cartridges as Atari.
Hills presents Intellivision, intelligent television by Mattel. More sophisticated than any video game that has come before, providing hours of entertainment for the entire family. Intellivision, with one of the...
And we now come to episode 3, where we continue this story with the boom of video games into our homes with the introduction of the new home computers. These new and cheap home computers allowed millions of people to discover for themselves what a computer was all about. These were very exciting and magical times. So let's get started and look at some of the key home computers and games of the 80s. Very exciting.
Well, it was a new market which was dominated by the Americans, and where clearly, if the cost could be reduced substantially, the market could be expanded.
Clive Sinclair was well known for a succession of cheap miniaturized electronic gadgets, from tiny televisions to pocket calculators. In 1980, Sinclair launched his first computer. It could be bought for £100, less if purchased as a kit, and it plugged into any television. Programs were sold on cassettes, playable by a cheap cassette recorder. Sinclair's computers took over most of the British market, and for a short time, even in America, he was selling more machines than the three market leaders put together. They turned up everywhere.
So the Sinclair ZX80 is a home computer launched on the 29th of January 1980 by Science of Cambridge Limited, later to be better known as Sinclair Research. It is notable for being one of the first computers available in the United Kingdom for less than £100. The ZX80 was very popular straight away, and for some time there was a waiting list of several months for the machine. The ZX80, named after the Z80 processor, was designed by Jim Westwood. It featured a 3.25 MHz Z80 CPU, 1 KB of static RAM and 4 KB of ROM. The machine had no sound output and used a simple RF connection to display on a household television. Video output was black and white and character based. The firmware contained the Sinclair Basic Programming Language, editor and operating system. The only means of expansion was a slot opening at the rear of the case, which exposed an expansion bus edge connector. The ZX80 was advertised as the first personal computer for under £100 and received praise for its value and documentation. However, it faced criticism for screen blanking during program execution, small RAM size and the keyboard design. Sales reached around 50,000 and the UK led the world in home computer ownership during the 1980s. The original ZX80s in good condition are now sought after by many collectors.
Why buy just a video game from Atari or Intellivision? Invest in the wonder computer of the 1980s for under $300. The Commodore VIC-20. Unlike games, it has a real computer keyboard. With the Commodore VIC-20, the whole family can learn computing at home. Plays great games, too. Under $300, the wonder computer of the 1980s, the Commodore VIC-20. Coming soon, Commodore brings you Gork, the Wonder arcade game, and Omega Race in home versions. Commodore.
The VIC-20 is an 8-bit home computer that was sold by Commodore Business Machines. The VIC-20 was announced in 1980, roughly 3 years after Commodore's first personal computer, the PET. The VIC-20 was the first computer of any description to sell 1 million units. It was described as one of the first computers that was no longer relegated to enthusiasts or those people who had a lot of money. The computer Commodore developed was the computer of the future.
There are those who worry that video game playing can become obsessive. At Commodore, while we think that's a little extreme, increasing your game scores may not always increase your IQ. So Commodore's games come in a different package, a full-fledged computer, the VIC-20, that allows your mind to expand into the thousands of things a computer can do, in addition to playing games.
I see by your job application, you've scored 6 million on the video game Munchman.
Yeah?
And I see you shot down 2 billion aliens from the planet Mongo.
Yeah.
You are good at computer games. So what do you know about computers?
If you're going to spend your time playing video games, why not play them on something that can also teach you about computing? Get a Commodore VIC-20. It's tough to grow up in a computer age without learning about computing. Become great at Pac-Man and you could be the envy of the neighborhood. Become great at the Commodore VIC-20 home computer and you could own the neighborhood.
Given a choice between learning computing and playing video games, which do you think a kid would choose? Exactly. That's why Zortek, a new learning game, was created exclusively for Commodore home computers. As kids play Zortek, they're really finding their way around a computer keyboard and mastering basic computer programming. So before you buy a computer for your kids to learn on, make sure it's one they'll want to learn on. One that plays Zortek and other famous learning games. A Commodore home computer.
El poder del futuro está en sus manos. Sears pone a su alcance la nueva computadora personal Sinclair ZX81. Funciona conectada a cualquier televisor o tocacassette. Práctica en el trabajo y el hogar, con memoria hasta de 16.000 caracteres. La computadora está a su alcance. También el crédito Sears. Demostraciones en nuestras tiendas. Timex brings the power of the computer within reach of more people than ever before. Introducing the Timex Sinclair 1000, the first of a new generation of computers designed to be easier to use and to own. For $99.95, power to learn at the speed of light, power to organize with unfailing accuracy. The Timex Sinclair 1000, power is within your reach.
The ZX81 is a home computer that was produced by Sinclair Research and manufactured in Dundee, Scotland by Timex Corporation. It was launched in the United Kingdom in March 1981 as the successor to Sinclair's ZX80 and designed to be the low-cost introduction to home computing for the general public. It was hugely successful. More than 1.5 million units were sold. In the United States, it was initially sold as a ZX81 under license by Timex. Timex later produced its own versions of the ZX81, the Timex Sinclair 1000 and the Timex Sinclair 1500. There was also unauthorized ZX81 clones that were produced in several countries. The ZX81 was designed to be small, simple and above all inexpensive with as few components as possible. Video output is to a television rather than a dedicated monitor. Programs and data are loaded and saved onto compact audio cassettes. It uses only 4 silicon chips and a mere 1 kilobyte of memory. It has no power switch or moving parts, with the exception of a VHF TV channel selector switch present in some of the models. It has a pressure-sensitive membrane keyboard. The ZX81 can be bought by mail order, pre-assembled, or for a lower price in a kit form. It was the first inexpensive mass-market home computer to be sold by high street stores, led by W.H. Smith and soon many other retailers. The ZX81 marked the point when computing in Britain became an activity for the general public, rather than a preserve of businessmen. It produced a huge community of enthusiasts, some of whom founded their own businesses producing software and hardware for the ZX81, many of whom went on to have roles in the British computer industry. The ZX81 commercial success made Sinclair Research one of Britain's leading computer manufacturers and earned a fortune and an eventual knighthood for the company's founder, Sir Clive Sinclair. Legend.
This is the story of Daphne, who longs to be alone with her very own BBC Micro. Alas for Daphne, Acorn have also made it rather attractive to small businessmen.
Hello, Dad.
Tragically, they've even made it irresistible to accountants.
Hello, Uncle Cyril.
How did you just get going?
And sad to say, it's become vital for everyone who needs up-to-the-minute information, thanks to its Presto and Teletext adapters. Worst of all, it's absolutely bung-ho for busy administrators. And then there are those visitors who want to use its unearthly scientific potential. Poor Daphne. The BBC microcomputer system is a world leader, and it's still growing.
The British Broadcasting Corporation Microcomputer System, or BBC Micro, is a series of microcomputers designed and built by Acorn Computers in the 1980s for the BBC Computer Literacy Project. Designed with an emphasis on education, it was notable for its ruggedness, expandability, and the quality of its operating system. An accompanying 1982 television series, The Computer Program, featuring Chris Searle learning to use the machine, was broadcast on BBC Two. After the literacy project's call for bids for a computer to accompany the TV programmes and literature, Acorn won the contract with the Proton, a successor of its Atom computer prototype, at short notice. Renamed the BBC Micro, the system was adopted by most schools in the United Kingdom, changing Acorn's fortunes. It was also successful as a home computer in the UK, despite its high cost. Acorn later employed the machine to simulate and develop the ARM architecture. While 9 models were eventually produced for the BBC brand, the phrase BBC Micro is usually used to refer to the first 6 models, which is Model A, B, B plus 64, B plus 28, Master 128, and then Master Compact. Subsequent BBC models are considered part of Acorn's Archimedes series.
I think it's a general public awareness of the place of microcomputers in the future and a need to get to grips with these sort of machines.
So when are shopkeepers going to be able to start taking delivery of dragons again?
Well, shopkeepers are receiving deliveries at the moment. The only thing that I'm not accepting now are orders guaranteed for delivery prior to Christmas because those orders are already in.
What do you see as the advantages your computers have over their rivals?
We see it as an easy machine with plenty of space available in the form of its 32K RAM, a number of useful facilities like the graphics and the sound, and a very simple BASIC, which is a worldwide standard, which means that they can access software from other sources quite easily.
What do you think we need to do to keep ahead in this field?
Keep an opinion of what the customer really wishes to buy, and obviously there is a need to keep redesigning and bringing new discoveries or new modifications into the machine as frequently as possible.
The Dragon 32 and Dragon 64 are home computers that were built in the 1980s. The Dragons were produced for the European market by Dragon Data Limited, initially in Swansea, Wales, before moving to Port Talbot, Wales. They were also situated in Spain from 1984 to 1997, and also in the US market by Tano of New Orleans, Louisiana. The model numbers reflect the primary difference between the two machines, which have 32 and 64 kilobytes of RAM respectively. Dragon Data introduced the Dragon 32 microcomputer in August 1982, followed by the Dragon 64 a year later. Despite initial success, the Dragon faced technical limitations in graphics capabilities and hardware-supported text modes, which restricted its appeal in the gaming and educational markets. Dragon Data collapsed in 1984 and was acquired by a Spanish company, Eurohard. And then in 1987, Eurohard filed for bankruptcy. The Dragon computers featured a composite monitors port allowing connection to modern TVs at that particular time. They used analog joysticks and a range of add-ons were also available. The Dragon had several high-resolution display modes, but limited graphics capabilities compared to the other home computers of that particular time. The Dragon came with a Microsoft Basic Interpreter in ROM, which allowed instant system startup. The Dragon 32 and 64 was capable of running multiple disk operating systems, and a range of popular games were ported to the system. The Dragon 32 and 64 were similar, but the Dragon 64 had a functional RS-232 serial port, which was not included in the Dragon 32. Overall, the Dragon computers were initially well received, but faced limitations that hindered their long-term success. The Dragon 32 is often dismissed by other 8-bit gamers, but this is really unfair as it has plenty interesting games on it. As well as notable classics like Chucky Egg and Jet Set Willy, it also has some great exclusives.
I'm more alive than ever before. I've been to my Commodore 64. My friends are knocking down my door to get into my Commodore 64.
It's mind-boggling. Commodore 64 lets you play hundreds more games than any video machine, plus draw, program, even do music.
I'm more alive than ever before, and my friends are knocking down my door. 'Cause now we're into so much more. We're into our Commodore 64.
Now we come to the main
In the competitive world of home computers, the Commodore 64 is absolutely unbeatable. With its enormous 64K memory, its printers, plotter, disk drive, monitor, and its vast range of software, we believe the only thing the Commodore 64 doesn't have is any serious competition. The Commodore 64. Never forget it's the world's biggest selling home computer.
Are you keeping up with the Commodore? 'Cause the Commodore is keeping up with you. In a world of fun and fantasy, and ever-changing views, and computer terminology, Commodore is news. Are you keeping up with the Commodore? 'Cause the Commodore is keeping up with you. Are you keeping up with the Commodore? 'Cause the Commodore is keeping up with you.
The Commodore 64, also known as the C64, is an 8-bit home computer introduced in January 1982 by Commodore International. It has been listed in the Guinness World Records as the highest selling single computer model of all time, with independent estimates placing the number sold between 12.5 and 17 million units sold. Preceded by the VIC-20 and Commodore PET, the Commodore 64 took its name from the 64 kilobytes of RAM. With support for multicolour sprites and a custom chip for waveform generation, the C64 could create superior visuals and audio compared to systems without such custom hardware. The C64 dominated the low-end computer market for most of the later years of the 1980s. For a substantial period, the C64 had between 30 and 40% share of the US market and 2 million units sold per year, outselling IBM PC Compatible's Apple computers and the Atari 8-bit family of computers. Part of the Commodore 64's success was its sale in regular retail stores instead of only electronics or computer specialties stores. Commodore produced many of its parts in-house to control costs, including custom integrated circuit chips from MOS technology. In the United States, it's been compared to the Ford Model T automobile for its role in bringing a new technology to middle-class households via creative and affordable mass production. Approximately 10,000 commercial software titles have been made for the Commodore 64, including development tools, office productivity applications, and of course, video games. Today, C64 emulators allow anyone with a modern computer or compatible video game console to run these programs today. The C64 is also credited with popularizing the computer demo scene, and even today it's still being used. Anyway, let's continue by looking at some of these wonderful games that came out in the Commodore 64.
Sinclair's new ZX Spectrum Action Pack has a powerful 128K home computer, a joystick, 6 very different games, and a deadly accurate light gun.
Keep on running, keep on hiding, keep on running, keep on
That'll keep those droids on the run. The new Sinclair Action Pack puts the zap back into computers.
Right, pay attention, Bond. This is the Sinclair ZX Spectrum Plus 2. It's a fully operational computer with 128K memory, but it comes with 3 James Bond games and a light gun that fires armor-piercing shells. Now that's your assignment. No, don't sit in that chair. Sorry, Bond. Haven't perfected that yet. The Sinclair ZX Spectrum Plus 2.
Once upon a time, there were 3 bears.
The 3 bears lived in the wood.
Learning Box is a new exciting series of computer programs
Kevin!
to help your child start reading and counting. Get your child ready for school with Learning Box.
The ZX Spectrum is an 8-bit home computer that was developed by Sinclair Research. It was released in the United Kingdom on the 23rd of April 1982 and became Britain's best-selling microcomputer. Referred to during development as the ZX81, Colour and ZX82, it was launched as the ZX Spectrum to highlight the machine's colour display, which differed from the black and white display of its predecessor, the ZX81. The Spectrum was released as 6 different models, ranging from the entry level with 16 kilobit of RAM released in 1982 to the ZX Spectrum Plus 3 with 128 kilobit of RAM and a built-in floppy disk drive in 1987. Altogether, they sold over 5 million units worldwide. The Spectrum was among the first home computers in the United Kingdom aimed at a mainstream audience, thus it had similar significance to the Commodore 64 in the US and the Thomson M05 in France. The introduction of the ZX Spectrum led to a boom in companies producing software and hardware for the machine, the effects of which are still seen. Some credit it as a machine which launched the British information technology industry. Licensing deals and clones followed, earning Clive Sinclair a knighthood for services to the British industry. The Commodore 64, Dragon 32, Oric 1 and Atmos, BBC Micro and later the Amstrad CPC range were rivals to the Spectrum in the UK market during the early 1980s. The machine was officially discontinued in 1992. I have massive respect for the Sinclair Spectrum. It had so many games compared to its rivals. I also used to spend hours inputting the many game codes on the rubbery buttons from the popular Sinclair magazines. It would take hours, and in most cases, particularly in my case, it would not always run first time due to inputting a wrong code.
Like humans, computers have memories. Unlike humans, their memories shrink when they work. Functions like color, sound, and movement use up large amounts of memory, leaving little for you to use. The new Oric Atmos, however, takes these functions in its stride, leaving lots of memory, so you can expand into advanced programming and sophisticated games. The new Oric Atmos 48K, the large memory that stays large.
Oric was the name used by UK-based Tangerine Computer Systems for a series of home computers sold in the 1980s, primarily in Europe. With the success of the ZX Spectrum from Sinclair Research, Tangerine's backers suggested a home computer, and Tangerine formed Oric Products International Limited to develop the Oric 1. The computer was introduced in 1982. During 1983, approximately 160,000 Oric 1 computers were sold in the UK, plus another 50,000 in France. This resulted in Oric being acquired and given funding for a successor model, the 1984 Oric Atmos. Oric was eventually bought by a company called Eureka, which produced the less successful Oric Telestrad in 1986. Then eventually Oric was dissolved the year the Telestrad was released. Eastern European legal clones of Oric machines were produced into the 1990s. When I was 13, I desperately wanted the Sinclair Spectrum 48K, but the demand was so high and outstripped the supply. Therefore, my mum bought me an unknown computer called the Oric 1 for my Christmas 1983 present. My friend and neighbour at the time also bought the same, but with the Oric Atmos. Basically an upgrade to the Oric 1 version I had. I really enjoyed my days playing the Oric 1 games. In fact, I created a dedicated playlist on my channel on the Oric Atmos games, so go and check it out.
See if I can remember the keys. Right, 2 is up, E is forward, A is down, and W is back. So this is like a Tron sort of game, if you remember the film Tron. Yes. So I don't know how you can speed it up. It seems to be going quite fast, that computer, but maybe that's not such a good thing. So basically, you just oh fucking hell! Push the wrong button.
Well, there you go. That was my very short overview of the early 1980s computers that invaded our British homes for the first time. A wave of cheap and futuristic devices that allowed millions of people to discover for themselves what a computer was. These fantastic machines promised to make computing user-friendly for the first time. They were all expected to reveal the wonders of information technology to the masses and bring about a revolution in homes, schools and workplaces. The arcades, gaming consoles and home computers were all part of this wonderful video gaming golden years. These were wonderful and exciting times for video gaming. Anyway, thank you so much for taking the time to watch this video. It would be great if you could perhaps give me a like, and it would be even more amazing if you would subscribe to my channel and become part of my gang. Until then, keep smiling and I'll see you all very soon. Bye bye. Our next episode covers the video game crash of 1983, also known in Japan as the Atari Shock. This was a large-scale recession in the video game industry that occurred from 1983 to 1995, primarily in the United States. The crash was attributed to several factors, including market saturation in the number of video game consoles and available games, many of which were poor quality, as well as waning interest in the console games in favour of personal computers. So, please stay tuned.
From Atari, made especially for systems from Atari. The video game that lets you help E.T. get home. Just in time for Christmas. Happy holidays from Atari.